Everybody, this is Rashi Berry from Columbia University. Today we have David Geary, Dr. David Geary. He is a distinguished professor at University of Missouri. He is the distinguished professor of psychological sciences. Thank you, Professor Geary, for joining.
Yes, thank you for the invitation.
All right, so do you mind if I call you Dave?
Yeah, Dave's good.
There is a stereotypes in our society that the men are better than women in mathematics. What is your take on it?
Yeah, there is a stereotype that men are better at math than women, probably because there's more male high-level mathematicians than women high-level mathematicians. The overall achievement differences are actually fairly small.
I see. Do you think that stereotypes really affecting women performance in mathematics?
Yeah, well, that was a theory that came out a while ago, stereotype threat that women would kind of choke or get anxious or whatever if they had to do hard math problems because they didn't want to confirm the stereotype. That was popular for quite a while, but it turns out it doesn't replicate. And so it's not something that is, if it's having any effect on women and girls, it's not much of an effect.
So, for example, 30 students, 15 of them are male, 15 of them are female. They were selected based on their SAT score, and they have the identical SAT score. They were told, both male and female were told that historically, male doing better in this test.
Mhm.
And once that information revealed, women performs less than the man. However, when that information kept secret, then
Mhm.
women perform as good as men.
Right. Yeah. Now, yeah, that's an older study, and that's true. In a lot of those studies, they kind of covary out prior math achievement,
Hmm.
which kind of confounds that. Follow-up studies haven't really found much of an effect. Half the time, we actually published a review, a colleague and I, a review on this, I don't know, about 12 years ago. And half the time that they find half the studies find that, but the other half of the studies don't find it.
Oh, I see. So
So it's like a 50-50 sort of thing. So if it is there for some women, it's not there for all women.
the beginning, you mentioned that there are more successful male mathematician than women mathematician. Who is responsible for that?
Well, there's yeah, probably a couple things going on here. If we look at all kind of general math tests, general math achievement tests like the PISA or some other national test.
Math Olympiad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Math Olympiad's a little different. With the PISA, there's not much of a difference. Boys do a little bit better on average than girls, but not much. And it actually varies across countries. Some countries girls do better, and some countries boys.
For example, Iceland, male and female are doing more or less are the same. Sometimes women do even better than the men, right?
Yeah, in some countries that's true. We've studied this.
Why is that? What is the reason behind it?
Yeah, women generally do pretty well on math problems that involve school-taught algorithms. So if the tests are pretty similar to what they've seen in textbooks or in classrooms, they do as well or better than men.
See,
Um, the sex difference, when it emerges, is mostly found for math areas that involve a visual spatial component to it, like geometry. There's a a moderate male advantage there, but for just algebra that doesn't involve.
do you think this is because historically male involved with with hunting and gathering, and women involved with cooking, staying at home? So male were exposed to outside the world, had to learn more way around how to find the unknown location and get back home. And so unfair advantage. Do you
Mhm.
think that had something to do with male doing better in geometry?
Yeah. I think that the navigation skills you typically see, depending on the species. In some species, there's no sex difference, but in species where males have larger ranges, kind of they wander around more either for hunting or looking for mates or whatever the case might be, the males tend to have better visual spatial abilities. And that's true with people. In traditional societies, men's home ranges are about 3 times larger than those of women. And so they use more space, they have to navigate around more, and there's probably some other factors that influence it as well.
Countries like Iceland, there is no difference between women ability in math and male ability in math. On the other hand, for countries like Afghanistan, you see that the women really behind than men. Is
Mhm.
there any gender index?
I would imagine that in some countries, some developing countries in particular, there are cultural, social restrictions on how much schooling that girls get. And when you have countries like that, obviously they're not going to do as well as boys if they don't go to school as long as the boys do.
So access to education has to be there. Otherwise,
Oh yeah.
can you tell us yeah, about your book, Children Mathematical Development? I mean, how children learn math?
Yeah, yeah. Great question. So I've argued we've studied math development from all the way from preschool up into old age, and approach it that math is an evolutionarily novel ability, unlike navigation or language or making inferences about what people are thinking or feeling or so forth. And so it's really highly dependent on um, what they get at home in terms of kind of informal math tutoring and stuff from their parents, and what they get in school or outside tutoring. Without schooling of some sort, people don't get math. They have an intuitive sense of relative quantity. There's more here or less there, but they don't understand algebra. They don't understand even arithmetic. It has to be very explicitly taught to kids.
Usually it starts from home, right?
Probably. We're looking at that right now. We found in a prior preschool study that kind of kids' early understanding of number words, kind of that the number three represents three things of any kind, for example, predicted their readiness to learn school-based math in first grade. And these differences were evident even before kids were 4 years old, before they even started preschool. Um, and so there must be something going on at home in terms of the amount of informal instruction kids are getting. And a number of people are starting to look at this, and we're looking at it as well, but we're not exactly sure what's going on. I think it's things probably like co-counting, parents and kids counting together 1, 2, 3, 4 to learn the number words and the number sequence, parents pointing out that there's four things here. So there's a group of four toys or whatever, and they're labeling it as four. And a number of informal things like that probably do give a lot of kids a heads up. We're finding that some parents do that at home, and other parents don't do much of anything in terms of number exposure, counting, and so forth. So if mathematics just kind of moves on. So if you start school behind, you start first grade behind, and you're just kind of understanding of Arabic numerals and number words and what they represent, then it's really hard to catch up. So it's important for kids to um, get this early number knowledge before kindergarten. So when they're probably about 4 years old, they need to have it down. Some of it will get in preschool, and as I said, some parents are very good at teaching this knowledge at home. We're not sure exactly what they're doing yet, and that's kind of one of the goals of our current project to figure out exactly what parents do. Just counting 1, 2, 3, 4 and stuff like that is helpful, but it's not enough. There has to be some more direct, probably um, pointing out that this is a set of four things, as I said before, five things, or
So children at a young age can really pick up language very quickly, and when they become old, is become very difficult for them to kind of learn a new language. For example, I spent few days in China. I was trying to learn some Chinese, but it was very difficult for me because at 47, I don't think is the best age to learn a new language. But
Mhm.
but also studies support that idea that at a young age, the student really pick up language quickly.
Right.
What about math? Is it also true for math?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So, there are built-in systems that help kids acquire language, whatever language they're exposed to, in the early years from birth all the way forward. And that system becomes specialized for the language they're exposed to. And so by the time they hit adolescence, it's harder for them to learn a new language. So if you'd been living in China for, a year or so when you were 3 or 4, you would have picked it up. But now it's like learning algebra. I mean, it's a whole different thing. Um, Kids do have an intuitive sense of relative quantity, like there's more candy in this one than in this one,
I see.
um, but it's not as extensive as the language network. So, and most of the math is kind of novel and it has to be explicitly taught. They don't have the same scaffolds to learn math as is there for language.
As people get older, the productivity of their brain, I think, goes down. For example, Newton stopped being productive, especially in math and science, after he turned 35-year old.
Mhm.
This is true for so many mathematicians. Why this is the case? Our brain kind of lose productivity when we get old.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the ability to kind of maintain focus and to engage in real difficult problem solving, especially in novel areas, kind of peaks in probably mid-20s or so, and then
I see.
begins to decline. People can maintain productivity into older age, so historians and other folks, if they develop a huge knowledge base
I
that
see.
is so dependent on kind of these raw problem solving abilities. But if you're trying to problem solve something without a huge knowledge base when you're older, it's going to be really, really difficult.
Do parents sometimes bias toward their sons rather than their girls?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually found that in one of our studies where we looked at um, the PISA, this international achievement test, and one of the years had parent questionnaires. So, how important is math for your kids? Sort of questions, and we found that parents, moms and dads, rated it as more important for sons than for daughters. It didn't really have an explanation for that, for why that's the case, but we did find that bias. It could be.
Uh, is that because what you said earlier that there are more successful male mathematicians than female mathematicians?
Possibly. I mean, some people have argued that, it's reflecting a stereotype that the boys are going to get more out of it than the girls. It's also possible that they understand that the marriage prospects of sons is more dependent on their economic and occupational success than it is for daughters. And so maybe they're thinking ahead for that. But the questionnaire we looked at didn't really get at the reasons. But we did find that more parents think it's more important for their sons.
Who sacrifice, give up their career after the marriage?
Typically, it's the women.
Is
If
the women.
Yeah, if you make the life trade-offs, you start to have kids in your 30s,
I
which
see.
would be common for women in STEM
I see.
careers. So they're in school through their 20s and 30s, and then they take a pause or they go part-time or whatever because the moms are generally putting more effort into the kids than the dads are.
When I go to community colleges, the classroom filled with girls, and we see less male student than the female student. Not math class, not the science class, but the other classes.
Right.
Math class, you probably gonna still see more male than the female.
Hmm.
Traditional math class, for example, like calculus or
Hmm.
higher level math class, you will still see more male than female. What is the reason behind it?
Yeah, women, there are a lot of very talented women, mathematically talented women, and they've actually been studied over time and through their career by David Lubinsky and Camilla Benbow at Vanderbilt. So they followed these individuals from the time they're 13 through their 50s, and the study's still going on. And they're all very good at mathematics, the boys and the girls and the men and the women. What they find is that women who are very good at mathematics, compared to men who have the same mathematical level,
Mm,
these women have they have broader interests than the men do.
mm,
And when a guy finds something he's competitive at and good at, it's like, well, I can beat all the other guys and girls with this skill. They tend to focus on that and just kind of hone in and not pay much attention to other things.
mm.
And so they're going to take all math and STEM courses. But women with the same level of math skills are going to take humanities courses and they might go into medicine instead of engineering, for example.
I see. So the male can narrow the focus, but the women has broader interest.
Right.
Male are better than women in mathematics. How can we overcome these stereotypes?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. How can we overcome it? Well, I guess just publicizing.
Are we overcoming it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are we overcoming? I think so. I mean, given the number of women in college now, the number of degrees in math, undergraduate degrees in mathematics, the difference there isn't that big. I mean, a lot of women, not very many people get mathematics degrees, but I think it's close to 50-50, men and women.
I see. So last 50 years has been better than previous 50 years.
Right. Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of changes.
So
Um,
next 50 years would be much better than while we are talking about last 50 years. We are doing better and better every day, right? Moving forward.
right. But what's interesting is that as countries become wealthier and more liberal and open, a lot of sex differences get larger. Um, so you have so when educational opportunities opened up for women in the 60s and 70s, there was a big rush. A lot more women went into engineering and then computer
Right.
science sorts of things. But that kind of peaked out in the 90s and hasn't changed much since then.
Why is that? What is the reason behind it?
Yeah, and yeah, that's a good question. I think it's due to interest differences. So the smart science, math capable women are more likely to go into fields that involve dealing with living things like medicine, nursing, veterinary medicine, those types of
You
fields.
are probably right. Now is February, Black History Month. Where is our Katherine Johnson?
Well, I think they're probably out there.
Out there. Okay.
But who hears about mathematicians
That's
or psychologists or neuroscientists or whatever, unless there's a movie made of them or
oh.
something. So,
So
a lot of popular culture stuff. I think Hidden Figures is the movie you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. The Hidden Figure. Yeah, yeah. Hidden
Yeah,
Figure.
yeah.
He was one of the
So,
characters.
so
Yes.
there's a lot of very talented women of all races out there. Just n nobody hears about them. Maybe in 30 years there'll be some movies and we'll hear about a few of them, but they fly under the radar of popular culture typically.
The last 50 years was much better than previous 50 years, but that's not the case for every single country in the world.
Well, yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. There's a lot of countries where um, girls' access to education is very restricted.
What is your message for those girls? Is there any hope?
Is there, well, I mean, it's, it's up to those countries. I mean, as they develop and become economically stronger, more liberal, we see educational opportunities opening up, like we've seen in Western Europe and the US. And then, the girls go into the, variety of higher ed um, fields. But there are a lot of places in the world where there's a lot of work to be done.